When the rain finally came in March, everybody relaxed. 15 inches over 2 weeks. Just like Noah predicted. Right on schedule. The bars in town were packed that Friday night. Celebrating. Buying rounds. Because for 3 years, Harper County had been holding its breath. 3 years of below-average rainfall. Wells running lower every season. Topsoil turning to dust. But now, rain. Real rain. Soaking rain. The kind that meant you could plant again. Borrow again. Breathe again. But there was one man who didn't celebrate. Thomas Garrett. 58 years old. Third-generation dryland farmer. Quiet. Kept to himself mostly. While everyone else was at Miller's Tavern toasting the forecast. Thomas was in his basement, staring at a well his grandfather had dug in 1947. The water was low. Lower than it had any right to be, after 2 weeks of rain. And that's when he noticed something else. The ants. Red harvesters. Millions of them. Moving in thick black lines across his property. Not toward food. Upward. Toward the highest ground they could find. He walked out to the cottonwoods along Kettle Creek. Old trees. 100 years, maybe more. Deep roots. Survivors. They were dropping branches. Not small ones. Major limbs. Thick as a man's thigh. No wind. No ice. No obvious disease. Just letting go. Thomas stood there for a long time, listening. Not to what people were saying. To what the land was saying. And the land was screaming. Harper County, Oklahoma. 40 miles south of the Kansas state line. 30 miles west of nothing much. Population 1,247 as of the last census. 3 grain elevators. 2 churches, both Baptist. 1 diner. 1 school that went K through 12. Wheat country. Had been since the 1890s, when the first settlers broke the sod. And like every farming community, Harper County ran on patterns. Spring rain. Summer heat. Fall harvest. The cycle had held for generations. Sure, there were bad years. The Dust Bowl had nearly killed the county in the 30s. Droughts in the 50s. Again in the 80s. But the ground always came back. It always did. That's what people believed. So when the National Weather Service issued its spring outlook in February 2018, everyone paid attention. Precipitation, near normal to slightly above normal. Temperature, average for the season. Outlook, favorable conditions for planting. The grain co-op held a meeting at the high school gym. Standing room only. They brought in an agronomist from Oklahoma State. He had charts, graphs, satellite data. All of it said the same thing, plant. Wheat prices were strong. 13-year high. The banks were lending again after years of tightening up. And the soil moisture, according to the USDA maps, was adequate. Not great, but adequate. By mid-March, every farmer in the county had signed their operating loans. Bought seed. Scheduled the planters. Dale Morrison, Thomas's brother-in-law, married to his younger sister Beth, took out the biggest loan of his life. Planted every acre he had. Even the marginal land he usually left fallow. "Tommy," he said one afternoon, leaning against Thomas's fence, "you signing papers this week?" Thomas shook his head. Dale laughed. "Don't tell me you're sitting out. Not with prices like this. Haven't decided yet." "Hell, there's nothing to decide. Rain came. Ground's ready. Money's good." Thomas looked out at his fields. Brown. Dormant. Waiting. "Maybe." Dale slapped the fence post. "You're overthinking it, old man. Sometimes you just gotta trust the process." But Thomas didn't trust the process. Because he'd walked down to that well again that morning. And the water level hadn't moved. 2 weeks of rain. 15 inches. And it hadn't raised the water table even half an inch, which meant it had all evaporated. Or run off. None of it had penetrated deep enough to recharge the aquifer. The Ogallala. The massive underground reservoir that stretched from South Dakota to Texas. The same aquifer that had turned the Great Plains into the breadbasket of the world. It was dying. Had been for decades, actually. Dropping a foot, sometimes 2 feet, every year. But nobody talked about it much. Because what were you supposed to do? Stop farming? This was all they knew. Thomas knew something else, though. Something his grandfather had taught him when he was 10 years old. Boy, the rain you see ain't the rain that matters. It's the rain you don't see. The rain that goes down deep. That's what keeps you alive out here. And right now, there was no deep rain. In early April, when everyone else was planting, Thomas started digging. Not planting. Digging. Big ponds. Catchment basins. 20 feet across, 6 feet deep. He dug 4 of them in places where water naturally pooled during a rain. Then he did something that made people think he'd lost his mind. He started tearing apart his barn. The old one his grandfather built. Solid tin roof. Perfect condition. And he rigged every square inch of it to drain into PVC pipes that fed into those ponds. Same with his house. His shop. His grain bins. Anything with a roof got replumbed. Dale drove by one afternoon and just sat there in his truck, staring. Finally got out. Thomas. The hell are you doing? Catchment system. For what? Water. Dale looked around at the empty fields. Then at the sky. Then back at Thomas. Tommy, it rained 2 weeks ago. There's water. Not enough. Noah says. I don't care what Noah says. Dale's face went red. You don't care? They got satellites, Tommy. Computers. PHES. And I got a well that's been here since 1947. And it's dry. It rained 15 inches. On top. Not underneath. Dale shook his head. Looked like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. You're making a mistake, Tommy. Biggest mistake of your life. Maybe. Bess worried about you. Says you're not yourself. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look scared. Thomas stopped working. Turned to face his brother-in-law. I am scared, Dale. I'm scared because everybody's acting like we dodged a bullet. But we didn't. We just don't know we're hit yet. Dale didn't have an answer for that. He got back in his truck and left. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas became the talk of the county. At Millie's Diner, where all the farmers had coffee every morning, his name came up daily. Garrett's lost it. Too many years alone. Does that to a man. Shame. His granddad was sharp as a tack. Even the pastor at First Baptist, where Thomas hadn't been in 5 years, called him. Thomas, folks are concerned. If you need someone to talk to. I appreciate it, Pastor. But I'm all right. You sure? Because not planting, tearing up your barn, it doesn't seem all right. I'm just preparing. For what? Thomas didn't answer that. Because he didn't know exactly. Just that the ants knew something. And the cottonwoods knew something. And the well knew something. And he trusted them more than he trusted any satellite. By late April, while the rest of Harper County watched their wheat seeds sprout, tiny green rows stretching to the horizon, Thomas finished his catchment system. 4 ponds. All interconnected. Gravity fed from every roof on his property. Total capacity, about 18,000 gallons. It wasn't much, but it was something. And when the skies stayed clear through May, it was everything. May 2018. The rain that was supposed to come didn't. At first, nobody worried. Seasonal variability happens all the time. The 10-day forecast kept showing rain, then pushed it back, then pushed it back again. By the third week of May, the wheat was starting to stress. Leaves curling, color fading from green to yellow-green. The farmers turned on their irrigation systems. Center pivot rigs that pulled water from wells drilled deep into the Ogallala. The pumps kicked on across the county. Dozens of them. And for the first few days, everything seemed fine. Then Jerry Kowalski's pump seized up. Burned out the motor trying to pull water that wasn't there. He called the well service. They came out, dropped a camera down. The aquifer had dropped 15 feet since last season. His well wasn't deep enough anymore. "You'll need to re-drill," the tech said. "Go down another 50 feet, maybe." "How much?" "30,000. Give or take." Jerry didn't have 30,000. He'd just borrowed 60 for seed and fertilizer. Within a week, 3 more wells failed. Then 6. Then it wasn't about failed wells anymore. It was about wells that still worked, but were pumping air half the time. Because the aquifer was collapsing. Not slowly. Not gradually. Fast. Decades of overpumping, combined with 3 years of below-average recharge, had finally caught up. The Ogallala, the underground ocean that had made this place farmable, was running dry. By June, the county was in crisis mode. The USDA sent reps. The governor's office issued a disaster declaration. Emergency loans were made available. But loans don't make it rain. And they don't refill an aquifer. Dale came by Thomas's place one evening in mid-June. Sat in his truck for a while before getting out. When he finally did, Thomas could see he'd lost weight. Face looked drawn. Eyes sunken. "You were right," Dale said quietly. Thomas didn't say anything. "I got maybe 3 weeks before the whole crop's dead. Can't get water. Wells pulling air. I'm sorry, Dale." "Are you?" The words hung there. "Yeah," Thomas said finally. "I am." Dale nodded. Looked at the ground. "Beth wants to know if we can stay with you. If it comes to that." "Of course. I might lose the farm, Tommy." "I know. 3rd generation. My granddad homesteaded that land in 1919. "I know." Dale left without another word. And Thomas stood there, watching the sun set over fields that should have been green, but were already turning brown. July 2018. The hottest July on record in Harper County. 17 straight days over 105 degrees. No rain. Not a drop. The wheat died. All of it. 80% of the county's crop just withered. Farmers walked their fields in a daze, looking at months of work and tens of thousands in debt, turning to dust. Some tried to salvage it. Cut it early for silage. Sold it as animal feed at a massive loss. Others just let it stand. Couldn't afford to harvest something worthless. But the wheat wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the cattle. Because without water, livestock die fast. The state brought in tanker trucks. Emergency distribution. But there were 12,000 head of cattle in Harper County. And 3 tanker trucks. You do the math. Animals died in the fields. Collapsed next to empty water troughs. Some farmers shot their own herds rather than watch them suffer. The county extension office stopped answering the phone. Because what were they supposed to say? On July 18th, Ray Hutchins, who farmed 800 acres south of town, walked into his barn and didn't walk out. His son found him the next morning. He was 54 years old. 3 days later, Mike Cordova, 51. Then Bill Ventura, 62. The funerals were packed. Nobody knew what to say. Because everyone understood. When you lose everything your family built over 100 years, and there's no way out, and the banks are calling. Some men break. At Millie's diner, the coffee tasted like ash. Nobody joked anymore. Nobody talked about next season. They just sat there, staring at their cups, wondering what the hell they were supposed to do. Thomas kept his head down. He didn't gloat. Didn't say, "I told you so." He just lived off his savings and watched his ponds. They were half full. Not from rain, there hadn't been any, but from the little bit of condensation and runoff his system had captured back in March and April. 18,000 gallons had become maybe 9,000 in the heat. But it was enough for his needs. Barely. In early August, Dale showed up again. This time with Beth and their 2 kids in the truck. "We lost it," Dale said. "Bank foreclosed. We got till the end of the month." Beth was crying. The kids looked terrified. Thomas didn't hesitate. "You'll stay here." "Tommy, I can't." "You'll stay here," he said again. Firmer. A week later, another family showed up. The Rodriguezes. Friends from church. Then the Kowalskis. By mid-August, Thomas had 11 people living on his property. Sleeping in the house, the barn, anywhere there was shade. And every day, he rationed out water from his ponds. 5 gallons per person per day. For drinking, cooking, washing. It wasn't comfortable, but it was survival. Nobody said much. They all knew Thomas had tried to warn them, and they all knew they'd laughed at him. Now he was keeping them alive. The rains finally came in late September. Too late for any crop. But they came. And slowly, very slowly, the aquifer started to recharge. Wells that had been dry began producing again. Not much, but something. By October, people started leaving Thomas's place. Going back to whatever was left. Dale and Beth stayed the longest. They'd lost the farm. Couldn't get it back. But Dale found work at the co-op. Beth got a job at the school. They rented a little house in town. Started over. One evening, Dale and Thomas sat on the porch. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Finally, Dale spoke. "I owe you my life, Tommy. You know that. You don't owe me anything." "Yeah, I do. And I can't ever repay it." Thomas shook his head. "Wasn't about repayment. Then what was it about?" Thomas thought about that. "I don't know. Just felt like the right thing." Another silence. Then Dale asked the question he'd been holding for months. "How'd you know?" Thomas looked out at the horizon. Brown dirt as far as you could see. "I didn't know, Dale. Not for sure. But you saw something." "Yeah. I saw something. What?" "The ants. The trees. The well. Little things that didn't make sense." He paused. "And I've lived here my whole life. 58 years. You spend that long paying attention, you start to feel when something's wrong. Even when the data says different. Especially when the data says different." Dale nodded slowly. "We all thought you were crazy." "I know. I'm sorry for that." "Don't be. You weren't wrong to trust the forecast. That's what reasonable people do. But you didn't." "No." "Why not?" Thomas took a long breath. "Because the forecast is based on the past. And the past don't always repeat. And the ground? Ground tells you the present. Right now. What's actually happening beneath your feet." He looked at Dale. "And right now was saying something different than the past." Harper County rebuilt. Slowly. 60 families lost their farms that year. Most never got them back. The county population dropped to 980 by the next census. The school consolidated. one of the churches closed. It wasn't the same place anymore. But the ones who stayed learned something. Now, when the forecast says, normal year, they also check the wells. They watch the cottonwoods. They pay attention to the ants. And every spring, more and more farmers build catchment systems. Just in case. Because Thomas Garrett taught them something no satellite ever could. That the data might be right. But the dirt don't lie. They trusted the forecast. He trusted the land. And when the rain didn't come, only one of them was ready.